From the Hype HQ studio in Chicago, Illinois, it's Startup Hype Man, the podcast. Hello, everyone. My name is Raj Nation, and I am the founder of Startup Hype Man. Fast-growing startups work with me because they want to become better storytellers. Whether that's for customers, investors, or a packed audience, they know that story is their ticket to stand out, stand apart, and change the game. And this podcast here is where I talk with entrepreneurs and leaders in the startup ecosystem, ranging from scale stage to early stage, as they share specific strategies that they have executed to stand out across three specific areas: sales, marketing, and people. Before we begin today's episode, remember you can head to startuphypeman.com and subscribe to the newsletter that doesn't suck. You'll get new podcast episodes and timely reads written by me, but also helpful articles from around the web and a notice of upcoming pitch competitions. All right, let's dive in and hear how today's guest is changing the game. Ladies and gentlemen, making his way to the microphone, residing in and born and raised from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. He is the founder and CEO of Autoklose. Please welcome Shawn Finder.
Thanks for having me on, Rajiv.
He is Shawn Finder, the CEO of Autoklose. What is Autoklose? It is a full outbound sales engagement software. Autoklose has been around for 2.5 years. They recently reached $1 million in ARR. They're growing at 35% year over year and have reached 42 employees. They've done all of this bootstrapped. Today, with Shawn, we're talking about a topic that has never been discussed on this show before, and I'm really excited about it. It is not all sales cycles are created equal. Now, before we dive into the episode, I want to make the disclaimer. This is being recorded in, I would say, I don't know yet if it's the height, but it's being recorded in the midst of coronavirus pandemic. So if you hear a difference in audio quality, it's because I'm not in the normal podcast studio. So the pre-recorded introduction that you heard when it said the Hype HQ studio, technically not the Hype HQ studio for this episode. Shawn is at home, so you might hear his dog barking in the background, but bear with us as we try and work together through this. Now, Shawn, again, our topic is not all sales cycles are created equal. Can you tell me why this is near and dear to your heart and why it's important to you?
Well, I'll tell you, because that's one thing that, working at different organizations, working in different sales positions, people go into a sales role and say, oh, well, I'm going to sell something in the first week, or it's going to take me 3 weeks of training and then I'm going to sell it in the first month. But there's different factors you have to look at within a sales cycle, because everything is not, it depends on what is the product or service you're providing? Is it is a product that is, also $25, a subscription model, or is it something that might be a hardware for $10,000? So your sales cycle might be a lot different there, depending on the price point. Also, what I found is a lot of people look at, how quickly can a prospect get an ROI? So when you are looking at that sales cycle, your prospect is also looking at how quickly can they get an ROI on buying that. So that will also depend on your sales cycle. And then lastly, I would say, just to give a quick glimpse into it, is where is that prospect in the hierarchy of the company? Are you talking to somebody that's a manager director, or are you talking to a C-level person that makes that decision? So the sales cycle will be different with whoever you're talking to at that company.
We're going to dive all into that in just a few moments. But first, let's get to know Shawn the man first. Now, pretty interestingly enough, as I've learned, you were a tennis star growing up, and you were kind of like charting a trail to become the next Andre Agassi. I don't know if that's by your estimation or by the tennis authorities' estimation, but tell me, let's start here. What made you decide to drop tennis and pursue business?
Amazing question. So I was one of the top ranked. I was number 2 in Canada, but I had a world ranking in tennis. And I was the same age as Roger Federer, so I'm 37 now. And what happened was it came to a point where, you get to 18 years old and you have to make the decision. Do you want to continue on with tennis? And if you fail or you get injured, you have to fall back and maybe be a tennis coach or something around tennis, or you go the education route. So I'm not going to lie, I did not have much of a choice. At that point, there was never a tennis player that made a career off tennis. Now we are amazing at tennis. We got 4 of the top players. So my mom goes, you're going to go do your MBA because you can't rely on tennis. And I said, but I want to be a tennis star. I want to be like Andre Agassi. She goes, the chances are slim to none. Go the education route. So I ended up going the education route and getting an MBA. And that's where I had to drop tennis because I wanted to go tennis, but my parents wouldn't let me actually go because at that point, as I said, no one's actually made a career out of tennis.
So we are blaming mom and dad for the fact that we got Federer and Nadal all these years instead of Federer versus Finder.
Oh, sometimes my doubles partner still to this day is actually a top 50 doubles partner in the world.
Wow.
And he's making it. And I guess I'm still happy. I'm growing a company.
Yeah. I think you're making it as well. Now, I'm a former athlete myself. I ran track in high school, ran for a year in college. I've had many entrepreneurs on this show who had some athletic background to them, whether it was college or high school. And I always think there's a story or lessons learned from the world of sports that apply to business. So
Yep.
What do you think are maybe the top 1, 2, or 3 things that you learned in tennis that have helped you in business?
Well, I will tell you, tennis is the reason why I am a successful entrepreneur. And here's the reason. And not only tennis, I would say any sport. Sports teach you a few things. A, to be competitive, and B, networking, which is your most intangible tool. So what happened was when I finished my tennis career, I taught tennis for 7 years to the national team, but I was also teaching people, and I'd always ask, oh, what did your parents do? And when I went to do my MBA, my 3 co-op positions were all through the parents of the people I taught tennis to. So I would say the most important thing that tennis brought me was it helped me network. And even to this day, some of our clients here, some of our biggest clients are actually through who I met through teaching them in tennis. So I would say networking is the number 1 tool and the best thing. And obviously, being competitive is a great thing for salespeople as well.
Awesome. Now, one other question I want to ask you, not tennis related, but when I told you coming into this, I was going to ask you, or I was going to introduce you like a pro wrestler. You said, oh, I used to watch wrestling as a kid. So who was your favorite wrestler growing up?
Macho Man Randy Savage.
Cream of the crop. Ooh, yeah. Perfect. Well, maybe you're becoming the macho man of sales engagement software. Some might say, most people wouldn't, but I would be the one to say that. Okay, so let's talk now about Autoklose. Let's start here. Give our listeners a background. I gave a very brief overview of it, but give our listeners a background of the software, the company, and how it got started.
Okay, so Autoklose, as I said, is an all-in-one sales engagement platform that has both the sales engagement plus a built-in database that people can use for prospecting. So how did I get there? After I finished my MBA, I started working for a software company. And what happened was the first week we had a list of data, of numbers and emails. And I was like, okay, we just bought this for $5,000 from a company that was doing billions of dollars. And the data quality was terrible. And I'm like, well, why don't I just start a company that provides good data? So I did that for a year while I was working as a VP of sales. And when I made my first sale, I left my 6-figure job and made $49.99 and started my first company called Exchange Leads. Now, Exchange Leads was a data company. We only provided data. And then what happened, our clients, you were using it, saying, Shawn, we love the data, but we have to find another tool to actually email the data. And I'm like, huh. So after a year of getting big clients, we kind of went to a standstill where we didn't know how to continue to grow at a rapid speed. And I didn't want to pay the Canadian government a lot of money in taxes with our profit. So I said, let's build another product. And we built Autoklose, which is the email tool that runs Autoklose. So Exchange Leads and Autoklose both run separately, but Autoklose has the data from Exchange Leads inside. And that's how we came up with the Autoklose, which is now almost 2.5 years old. And Exchange Leads is about 4.5 years old.
So are you still selling Exchange Leads, or is it just it comes packaged with Autoklose?
Both. I would say we focus strictly on Autoklose and the data. The database is white labeled, but we do have companies like VMware, DHL, Rogers, who were still buying data from Exchange Leads. So that company is still incorporated so we can get those contracts.
Got it. Okay. And maybe they just got another system that they're using then to do the
yeah, it's also, when you're a preferred vendor with Exchange Leads, for us to go to them now and say, okay, we have to change that. It's a lot of paperwork. So I'd rather just keep Exchange Leads there. And then they could
sure reduce the headaches.
Yeah.
Okay. So, the topic is not all sales cycles are created equal. And as you mentioned at the start, when I asked why it's near and dear to you, it's because, you talked about how you could have the same number of days in two different customers, and
Yeah.
it could take the same amount of effort essentially with two wildly different customers producing two wildly different contract values. So when you launched Autoklose initially, and I'm going to guess it was you just pulled Exchange Leads customers over, but what was like your customer profile at that point, and how is that different from, or how did that change over time, I should say?
That's an amazing question. And that's something that I think a lot of companies miss is, so A, you're right. Yes, we did upsell all of our Exchange Leads clients. But what we did strategically also, and this is something I'd recommend to anyone starting a business, is we built a landing page 6 months before the day of our launch of Autoklose. And what we did was we promoted Autoklose to everyone as a coming soon. And every week we would send them any improvement we made on the development of Autoklose. So it's like building a condo. We made our clients and prospects feel like they were building Autoklose with us. So when we actually had our launch day, we sent an email saying the product is finished. We want to give you exclusive access for the month of January. And we booked, I think, almost 800 demos just by having that email list and doing all that generating all that hype before launch. So that's how it come. And when we first started, I would say we had a lot of solopreneurs, a lot of small business, but we didn't really know what our buyer's persona was. It wasn't until about 4 months later when we sat in a boardroom and spent 12 hours building out our pains and gains. But I think, over time, what we decided was we want to get away from those really solopreneurs and small businesses, because those are the ones that are headaches. Those are the ones that credit cards come insufficient funds. Those are the ones that decline credit cards. Those are the ones that if they don't get an ROI in the first week, they're calling you saying, I didn't get an ROI, I can't keep spending money with you. And that's where we can continue to make that shift into SMB, where we are now, where we're trying really with the small and medium-sized businesses. We're not going after the enterprise whale clients, but we're trying to stay in that little SMB market.
And I feel like different companies define SMB slightly differently. So how does Autoklose narrowly define SMB?
So we like to go after companies that are like 50 to 200 employees. And the reason why is we look at a company that has 50 to 200 employees. At 200 employees, they might have 40, 50 people in sales. And then we want to go after those companies that are those 50 sales teams. Sure.
Okay. All right. Now, you said that you were hitting the point where like the solopreneurs and the truly small businesses were saying, hey, this isn't working for us after like a week. And it was just really, it sounds like the risk was too high on their end to continue with the product, right? And therefore they were churning.
Yeah, they were churning, or like, for example, like now, we're going through a pandemic, for example. Most people can't, they can't, a lot of people don't think they can prospect when they should be, but you'll get the small solopreneurs that are just trying to keep their businesses open right now, and they're pausing and canceling. Whereas the SMB clients, like, guys, like no excuses. We have to still run a business in 3 months, keep going. So we're finding that you might have the 1-person teams that are canceling, where the 5 to 10-person team are actually like, let's get 10 more accounts and now double down on it. So that's what the big difference is. But I think you get a lot of support headaches. You get people that don't know how to use tools, how to use a CRM, how to use a sales engagement tool when they are too small. And I like to say, it's tough to teach old dogs new tricks. So if you have a guy that's been in business 20 years, he doesn't want to learn Salesforce, Autoklose, or anything.
Sure. Okay. Now, when you had that coming up, where you just found the smaller companies were just too much of a hassle, and I think you'll find too, like, I'm sure you did, that like their consideration took just as long or maybe longer to even buy the software, right?
Oh, I will tell you, it actually, and I learned this from Exchange Leads, and I've brought that into Autoklose. It took longer for me at Exchange Leads to close a $49.99 deal on a monthly basis than it did for me to get a PO for $175,000. Okay. And let me tell you, I did not hear for the full year of the $175,000 deal. I did not even hear or get an email from them. Whereas the $49.99 deal, I mean, everything that went wrong, my email didn't deliver. I asked for it at 11 o'clock. It was delivered at 11:02. That's what we would get in our support channel.
So I have a similar story. A couple of years ago, I had created a virtual accelerator style program called Hype Man Academy, which was designed for early stage startups
Yeah.
to walk them through essentially like what I would do in consulting,
Okay.
but in a more like group workshop format. So
Yeah.
it was like, hey, we're going to build out your elevator pitch. We're going to build out your investor pitch deck. We're going to talk about the fundamentals of selling your product, all those things. And my logic was, to that point, I had been doing the in-person or, like the live consulting with
Yeah.
companies, but it was tough to find enough early stage companies who could, spend on a several $1,000 consulting package.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to create a $997 virtual program.
Yeah.
We'll live workshop it and all that stuff. And it'll be way easier. And what I found was that it was arguably harder to sell $997 than it was to sell. I mean, I think at that point I was doing like $7,000-$8,000 consulting packages. And then compare that to today, where most of my work is focused on like, I'd say companies that are around like Autoklose's stage, like scale stage companies that are 50-ish employees, where the consulting now and it's more sales and marketing focus is $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 consulting. And I'm telling you, like, just as you've experienced, it is the same or shorter sales cycle with less weird objections in the in between. There's a pretty clear understanding of like why this is important and what to do about it. And I believe, and I'm sure you've seen this too, like you mentioned the PO scenario.
Yeah.
At whether it's $997 for a company that just started or $8,000 for a company that's 3 months old, that purchase represents such a higher percent of their business than, in your case, $175K deal for a 50-person sales team. That represents such a much smaller slice of the overall revenue that company brings in versus when you were selling a $50 product to a freelancer. That's what, $600 a year.
Yeah.
Which maybe they're doing $50,000 in revenue all year. So that's like a big piece of their business then.
Yeah. And it was just, it was also the amount of time they took from our support team. Like, I mean, the smaller businesses, they just don't know how to use the platform properly. And, they would write, for example, like we had funny stories where we had clients that would, they'd send an email out and their subject line was like free trial. I'm like, well, you're going right into spam.
Yeah.
So, or there'd be like one person with the best one we had was one person that was a small business. He goes, Shawn, I sent the email out, but I have a 0% click rate on the email. What's wrong with your platform? And we look at the email and there's nothing to click. So if you have nothing, those were the kind of things we were going through. And we've slowly, it took about 1.5 years to get up there, but we've slowly moved to that small business, which is good.
Well, tell me then, like, at what point were you like, okay, enough is enough, right? Because you had these things coming up, but were you like, okay, 50 people have been coming to us with this? Or do you remember like that moment when you were like, we have to make a change?
Well, it's also smaller businesses and companies with one employee, they don't want commitment. So they want to go month to month. Whereas, when you get to the stage where we're past the start, we're in like that growth stage right now.
Yeah.
If we ever want to get acquired by a company or merge with a company or get an exit, they want people on annual contracts. Mm-hmm. So we couldn't get the commitment from the boss. So I had to kind of adjust a lot of things in my company to make sure that, okay, we don't have a plan to get acquired, but say we get acquired a year from now, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, we have to plan now that, okay, we need people signing a year contract, because what the investors are going to look at is, what is your ARR? What is your MRR? But if I only show, okay, we have an MRR, but our churn rate is this, et cetera, it wouldn't look good. So we have to try and get those bigger companies with, 20, 30, 40 reps. And that's what we've been going for the last few months.
Tell me about when you made that transition. Did you have a target list in mind of who to go after, and how did the sales process differ?
Yeah. So it's actually very interesting. So what we do is we use Autoklose, obviously, for our own prospecting. We have 50 accounts we use for 4 people in our sales team. And then we use LinkedIn. We use social selling with a combination of our tool. And how that works is we actually only target VPs of sales and CEOs, for example, of 50 to 200 employees. So we go on Sales Navigator and we target that. In our database inside Autoklose, we only target people there. If we have people that are a solopreneur that want it, instead of having my sales team now do a demo with them and wasting 45 minutes, it's like, go and sign a 14-day trial. If you like it, it's a la carte. You go and do it. We don't have our team actually spend time with it. So that's kind of how it's changed a little bit. But it's definitely something that takes time. And we also hired SDRs, account executives, customer success managers. So there's a whole process through to make that transaction happen.
Okay. I want to talk through some of the changes you've seen in the bigger customers. But before I do that, I just want to take a sidebar here and let our listeners know about a new partner of the show in Sales Hacker. So if you've been a longtime listener of the show, then you know that I'll feature more B2B startups like Autoklose. And if you didn't know, Sales Hacker is the world's smartest community for forward-thinking B2B professionals. They have 135,000 members, which means whether you're a CEO like Shawn or a head of sales or a sales rep, Sales Hacker is just going to help you flat out get better at your job with things like podcasts, articles, webinars, and research from actual sales experts and practitioners, including yours truly, the Startup Hype Man. I contribute content every now and then. It's no fluff from outside people just trying to build up their own lead list. It's just a straight dope to grow your sales acumen. I'm a huge fan of Sales Hacker, and I'm really excited to have them as a partner of the podcast. All you have to do to get involved with all that content, the webinars, the research, the articles, the podcast, is go to saleshacker.com and just enter your email address. They send out a newsletter every week. And then on top of that, you can just access everything on their website. Again, that is saleshacker.com. Today, we are with Shawn Finder, the CEO and founder of Autoklose, talking about not all sales cycles are created equal. So, Shawn, as you made that transition into the small business market, small SMB market, which was bigger than your truly small and more or less like solopreneur market before, you mentioned how you could just let them like trial it out as part of the sales process. How did you decide, hey, X number of days is good enough for them to get a piece of it or get a taste of it? And then how did you also encourage them to actually use it? Because oftentimes people will give free trial, but the person on the other end will forget to use it because it's free.
100%. And I do agree with you. So what we implemented is I actually hired a customer success manager specifically for that role. So when somebody signs up for 14-day trial, we have like a white glove approach where we reach out to them. If they don't, set up their email right away, et cetera, our customer success is on them to get them signed up. Because we find if we can get that person actually use it over the 14 days, we convert obviously a lot higher rate than if somebody did. So that's one of the things I think a lot of companies don't do enough of. They don't spend enough time on the 14-day trials because to have an employee just calling 14-day trials all day is probably expensive. So we're lucky that we have a team out in Europe as well. So the team in Europe is actually doing that. But it's one of the best things we've done was hiring our success to do that, as well as onboard and train any new client. Because the first time a client uses your platform is the most important. You want them to feel like they understand it. It's easy to use, the user interface. So hiring that role is very important. But that is a great point by you, Rajiv, because I'll tell you, that's something that we learned about 5 months ago when we made that hire for a customer success manager.
With this slightly bigger market, the small business market, now when you were selling to the solopreneurs and the truly small teams, I would almost guarantee you were only ever having to speak with one person. Yep. Oftentimes, people's hesitancy to go up market, or not necessarily hesitancy, but just a concern or issue that has to be addressed is, well, now there's multiple decision makers, and now there's a little bit more bureaucracy, and a lot of times it can take longer.
Yep.
What type of decision-making process have you found it to be like on the buyer side?
I go from the top down. So I actually start with the CEO and say, hey, if it's a 200-person company, CEOs are still very involved. If you're talking to a company that does 10,000 employees, it's different. So I might reach out to a CEO and say, hey, my VP of sales is looking for who we should contact that evaluates sales tools. Who would that contact be? They give you the contact, and then you go to that contact and say, hey, just got off the call or just got off LinkedIn with so-and-so who's your CEO. He thought it'd be a good idea for us to have a quick demo, quick call. You have 15 minutes this week, et cetera. So I actually go top down. I do have salespeople on my team that go bottom up. I've always been the guy that, listen, I go for the top, and if wherever I land, I land.
Yeah.
So I like to go that way, but I think it all depends on what works for you, because each salesperson is different. Everyone's approach is different. But that's something that's worked for me. Like, I mean, I remember back in the day when I got the big deal at Exchange Leads, I went up to a C-level person, and then they introduced me to the VP level person, and the V level person actually introduced me to the director, who was actually the person making the decision, had the budget. But I went right from the top down. It took me about 2-3 weeks, but like, I just want to make sure that when that person in the director role knows that the C-level, VP level already spoke to me, they take you more serious.
Of course. Yeah.
And the company I'm talking about had almost, I think it was like, 25, 30,000 employees at the company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, so, I also go straight to the CEO almost always. So for example, like someone like you is who I would contact first. And then if you need to put me in touch with the VP of sales, you would. But I'm typically like pitching you as the CEO about more or less like my value prop is here's what the situation is at your company. Here's where I can help. Here's how it would make you look good as the CEO, and make your company look good, et cetera. Yep. And part of my sales process oftentimes is actually doing like a demo review, like doing a sample review of one of their demo calls with one of their reps. And if I did it the other way, where like I went to the rep first, said, hey, I can review a demo call, they're probably going to say, no, I don't know who you are. Like,
don't waste my time.
Yeah, don't waste my time. Or if they said yes, they just be like, thanks. That was super helpful. And because they're not buyers, so it's not ever on their mind to be like, oh, I should introduce you to my CEO or to my VP of sales. Yeah. And if I did make that ask, they'd be like, I don't know if I feel comfortable with that, because they just don't have that, like, usually they don't have that authority yet in the company.
Exactly.
But when you go top down and the CEO says, or the COO or whoever it is, right, says, hey, SDR, hey, AE, I want you to meet with Raj. He's going to work with you on this thing real quick. What are they going to do? Say, no, thanks?
Yeah, exactly.
So what type of, I guess, what's been the difference in objections you've seen? I mean, obviously, like with the earlier companies, you mentioned some of the problems they were having, but with these 200-ish person companies, 40, 50 person sales teams, what objections come up?
So it's interesting. So with the small businesses, they want a return on their investment right away. If they don't get a return on their investment right away, they want to cancel, because time is money and money is time. So that's what we found with the small. Then once we got into like our reps where they have 50 reps, it was more their manager wants to know, they're not really, they are worried about the results, but they're more worried about, are they using it? Mm-hmm. So if they have 50 users using it, one of our bigger clients has like 75 users now on the platform. It's almost like 10 a week. And they just want reports on who's actually using the platform. Where the small business want to know, I haven't made money on it in a week, I want to cancel. Where any tool you use needs some tweaking. And a sales engagement tool, you're not going to get the results in 2 days. You have to follow up with your prospects. So that could take 2-3 weeks. But solopreneurs and small businesses, they don't have patience.
Yeah. Tell me if you found this as well, because I know I did. My own stress level was so much higher when I was trying to sell smaller price to smaller companies.
Oh, and not only that, you're also worried about, okay, like, early on we had, okay, they would sign up. This is an interesting story. I had a guy that signed up. He sent us a PayPal. We sent him the data. He emails me saying he loves the data, and then called PayPal and wanted his money back. And as you know, on PayPal, they automatically
they don't question. Yeah.
They don't question. They get money back. So I hear him like, but you sent me an email saying that you're getting results, you close deals. He's like, yeah, but I just want my money back. And then I actually had to fight with PayPal, and PayPal never goes with the seller.
The merchant, yeah.
And I actually won. But it was like at that point, so that from that point on, we also changed that any deal over $5,000 is a wire transfer. Because people can pay credit cards or PayPal. They can love your product, and a year from now be like, okay, I'm not even sure. A small business will be like, VP of sales signed up for $5,000. A month later, they get fired. A month later, the CEO goes, well, I never approved that. I'm asking for a refund. So we had so many stories, and that's why we kind of tried to move up the ladder.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're doing a good job at it. Let me ask you one more question before we begin our wrap up. If you were looking at another company, let's say another company brought you in as an outside consultant and was like, hey, assess our market here and let us know, should we move up market or stay where we are or move down market? What are some like indicators you'd be looking for?
It's a good question. So one indicators would be churn rate. What is your churn rate? Also, I would look at, are you hiring a sales team? Because one of the things we had to do was, if I'm selling $49 subscriptions, I can't hire a sales guy for $60,000 because I got to sell a lot of $49 subscriptions. So you have to make sure the price point of your product can allow you to hire a salesperson and also make them commission, because no one wants to make a commission off a $100 deal. What am I going to give you, $20? Or if it's at least a $5,000 deal, they make $1,000 per commission. So those are the two things I would say you have to look at, is where you want to be a year from. So don't look right now, look short-term, long-term, and also be like, how am I going to build out my sales team? And is the price point of what I'm selling at good enough that I can buy and hire sales teams? So those would be the two things I would do. Okay.
To the point about the churn rate, you said you'd look at churn rate, but what's a range or a number or a percent rather that makes you say one versus the other?
So we were at about a 16 to 18% churn rate when we had very small businesses.
Wow.
And that was in our first year. We've lowered that now to about 5.5%. And that's simply because the bigger the company, they don't churn as quick. And we've also put in now, a lot of more enterprise and small, medium features on the platform. So we had a big churn rate at the beginning because there's people that would come in, they would just try it out for a month, or they would abuse the system. Email as many as they can in a month, cancel for a month, rebook again, and that all affects your churn rate.
Okay. Let's begin our wrap up then. Thank you for sharing that. And that's kind of crazy that you had a 16, 18% churn. I mean, I can imagine you were like, what the hell is going on here when those were the numbers? And you did find out what the hell was going on. So to begin our wrap up, what's the best way for our listeners to get in touch with you and learn more about Autoklose?
Yeah. So in touch with me, LinkedIn. I'm always active on LinkedIn. Just look for Shawn Finder. Email Shawn, SHAWN, @autoklose.com, and that's autoklose with a K. If you want any information about our tool, www.autoklosewithak.com. But those are the three ways to get a hold of me.
Now, we'll do our top one or two lessons or takeaways for the listeners based on the discussion today. I'll go first, and then I'll toss it to you, although I might steal your thunder in the process, because I think so our topic today was not all sales cycles are created equal, specifically around should you be, if you have 30 days to make a sale, should you focus on higher volume, lower value customers, or lower volume, higher value customers? If all things equal and you're going to get roughly the same sales cycle. To me, the really key things that you said were right at the very end there, which was, if you're trying to make that decision, what is the value of the sale versus how much is this, like does the salesperson's commission need to be? So that helps you just do the math on it. And then looking at key indicators like churn rate. But then I think too, like qualitatively, what friction comes up in the sales process, and is that friction scalable? Shawn, what top one or two takeaways or lessons for the listeners?
Well, I would say, all businesses, all salespeople, you go through pivots and you go through up and downs, but the most important is don't make any decisions on panic. As we're going through this pandemic right now,
very timely advice.
Don't make decisions on panic. It might take short term, might be medium term, but I think that's what a lot of business owners do. They're trying to see if they'll still be able to exist in a few months. So don't make decisions on panic, and don't pivot on panic. If something was working 2 months ago, and just because now we're going through a little thing, in the market and in the economy and everywhere, things will change. And I would say, in a sales cycle, the most important thing, and not enough salespeople doing enough this, the most important thing for a salesperson in a sales cycle is follow-ups. I didn't mention a lot about follow-ups, but a lot of CEOs, a lot of business owners, a lot of people are busy. You will not probably get that return on your investment or that email back on your first email. So make sure you're following up in those sequence, and that will help shorten your sales cycle.
My final question, fill in the blank. Entrepreneurship is blank.
is a grind. I went into entrepreneurship thinking, okay, this will be easy. I'll get acquired in 2 years. I'll be a millionaire. It doesn't happen. It's hours and hours. You're working a lot. You got to wear many hats. Sometimes you got to go into support. Sometimes you got to go into sales. But entrepreneurship or sales is a grind. You have to follow up with it if you're in sales. You have to continue to go. You can't make this pandemic say, okay, nobody's buying now. People are buying. You need to fill the top of your sales funnel. You need to be ready for when this pandemic hits its peak and starts on descending down or finishes, that you are ready to get right back into the saddle and start selling again.
Yeah, I think you can either turtle and cower away, or you can lean in and kind of go hard right now. And I think there's people who are cowering when they shouldn't be. Obviously, some adjustments need to be made, but like you said, top of funnel still has to get filled. Otherwise, 100%. You're going to come out of this and be like, you're going to be behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, exactly.
He is Shawn Finder, the CEO and founder of Autoklose. Shawn, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thanks for having me on, Rajiv.
That wraps up today's conversation. Did you like what you heard? Startup Hype Man, the podcast, is available on every major platform, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, and more. So be sure to subscribe on your platform of choice and leave a rating and review. Do you want to be an upcoming guest on the show? Email media@startuphypeman.com with your idea, and my team will review. Our theme song is Change the Game by Jay-Z, all rights owned by Rockefeller and Def Jam Records. And hey, if you want to work together on making your startup story the only one that matters, email me at rajiv@startuphypeman.com. That's RAJIV@startuphypeman.com. Well, that'll do it for today. Thank you for listening. Thank you to today's guests for joining. You have been checking out Startup Hype Man, the podcast. I'll catch you next week. But in the meantime, word up, raise up.